Have you ever felt that soul-stirring moment when fate brings two hearts back together after years apart? When the white CEO collapsed at the sight of those twins he once rejected, now standing proudly beside their radiant mother on that magazine cover, it wasn't just shock. It was the universe orchestrating a breathtaking reunion that would awaken dormant feelings neither had forgotten. Gerald Whitmore straightened his tie for the third time that morning, staring at his reflection in the mahogany-framed mirror of his corner office. At 50 years old, he had built Whitmore Enterprises from the ground up, transforming it from a small tech startup to one of the most profitable companies on the East Coast. The lines around his eyes had deepened over the years, but his posture remained impeccable, a testament to his military school upbringing and unwavering discipline. "Mr. Whitmore, your 10 o'clock appointment is here." His assistant's voice came through the intercom, interrupting his thoughts. Gerald pressed the button. "Send them in, Margaret." He moved to his desk, positioning himself in the high-backed leather chair that had been custom-made to his specifications. Image was everything in business, and Gerald had curated his carefully over decades. The office walls were adorned with framed awards, diplomas from prestigious institutions, and photographs of Gerald shaking hands with various politicians and celebrities, each item strategically placed to tell the story of success, power, and influence. The double doors opened, and Margaret ushered in a young woman. Gerald immediately noticed her worn but clean clothes, the way she clutched her purse with white knuckles, and most strikingly, the twin boys flanking her sides. The boys couldn't have been more than 16 or 17, with identical serious expressions that seemed too mature for their youthful faces. "Mr. Whitmore, this is Ms. Diana Johnson and her sons, Marcus and Michael," Margaret announced before quietly exiting, closing the doors behind her. Gerald didn't stand. Instead, he gestured to the chairs across from his desk. "Please, sit down." Diana Johnson nodded, her back straight, despite her obvious nervousness. "Thank you for seeing us, Mr. Whitmore. I know you're a busy man." There was something in her voice, a quiet dignity that caught Gerald's attention. The twins sat on either side of their mother, their expressions unreadable but their eyes alert, taking in every detail of the office. "Margaret mentioned you were referred by Richard Townsend," Gerald said, recalling his college roommate who now ran a community outreach program in one of the city's underprivileged neighborhoods. Diana nodded. "Yes, Mr. Townsend has been very supportive of my boys' education. He thought you might be interested in their proposal." Gerald raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued despite himself. "Proposal? I was under the impression this was about the scholarship program." "It's related," Diana replied, then turned to one of her sons. "Marcus, would you like to explain?" The boy on the left, Marcus, reached into a worn backpack and pulled out a neatly bound presentation folder. He stood and placed it on Gerald's desk with steady hands. "Mr. Whitmore, my brother and I have developed a peer-to-peer tutoring application that connects high-achieving students from underprivileged backgrounds with those struggling academically," Marcus explained, his voice clear and confident. "We believe this could complement your company's existing education initiative while addressing a critical need in communities like ours." Gerald opened the folder, surprised by the professional quality of the proposal. Graphs, market analysis, projected outcomes. It was more comprehensive than some presentations he'd received from seasoned executives. "And you developed this yourselves?" Gerald asked, unable to hide his skepticism. The other twin, Michael, spoke up. "Yes, sir. We've been coding since we were 10. We started with basic HTML and progressed to more complex languages. The app is already functional in beta form. We've implemented it at our school with promising results." Gerald flipped through the pages, his trained eye spotting the potential immediately. The concept was innovative, addressing a gap in the educational technology market that larger companies had overlooked. If developed properly, it could be extremely profitable while generating positive public relations. "And what exactly are you looking for from me?" Gerald asked. closing the folder and leaning back in his chair. Diana Johnson cleared her throat. The boys have been accepted to the Young Entrepreneurs Summer Program at MIT, but even with partial scholarships, we can't afford the remaining tuition and expenses. We're hoping Whitmore Enterprises might sponsor them as part of your community outreach initiative. Gerald's eyes narrowed slightly. In exchange for ownership of their concept? No, sir, Marcus replied firmly. We're proposing a mentorship arrangement, your guidance and the opportunity to learn from your company's resources in exchange for allowing Whitmore Enterprises to be the first to review any enhancements we develop during the program. Gerald studied the twins more carefully now. Their clothes might be second-hand, but their posture and articulation spoke of ambition and intelligence. Something stirred in his memory. His own beginnings, the hunger for opportunity, the drive to succeed against all odds. But another part of him, the part shaped by decades in corporate America, by boardrooms and bottom lines, calculated the risk versus reward. Two black teenagers from what was clearly a struggling single-parent household. The statistics weren't in their favor, regardless of their apparent talent. Your proposal is interesting, Gerald said finally, his tone measured. But Whitmore Enterprises receives hundreds of sponsorship requests annually. Our resources, while substantial, are not unlimited. He watched disappointment flicker across Diana's face, though she quickly masked it. The twins' expressions remained unchanged, as if they had anticipated this response. However, Gerald continued, I'll have our education division review your application. They handle all our scholarship decisions. It was a polite dismissal, and they all knew it. The education division was largely a tax write-off, focusing primarily on children of existing employees and carefully selected candidates from preferred partner schools. We appreciate your time, Mr. Whitmore, Diana said, rising to her feet with dignity. The twins followed suit, each collecting their belongings with practiced efficiency. As they turned to leave, Michael paused and looked back at Gerald. Sir, may I ask one question? Gerald nodded, curiosity getting the better of him. What would you have said if we'd walked in here with white skin but the same idea? The bluntness of the question sent a jolt through Gerald. Before he could formulate a response, Diana placed a gentle hand on her son's shoulder. Michael, that's enough, she said quietly. Thank you again for your consideration, Mr. Whitmore. The trio exited the office, leaving Gerald alone with the proposal on his desk and an unexpected discomfort in his chest. He pushed the folder aside, telling himself he'd done them a favor by not giving false hope. The business world would eat them alive. Better they learn that lesson early. He pressed the intercom. Margaret, please cancel my lunch. I'll be working through. As he turned to his computer, Gerald tried to dismiss the meeting from his mind. He had built his empire on sound business decisions, not emotions or charity cases. Yet Michael's question lingered, an uncomfortable splinter in his thoughts that he couldn't quite extract. Outside, as Diana and her sons waited for the elevator, Marcus put his arm around his mother's shoulders. It's okay, Mom. We'll find another way. Diana smiled at her boys, fierce pride overriding her disappointment. You always do. And remember what I've taught you. Rejection is just redirection. Michael nodded, his eyes already focused on the future. Next time, we'll be the ones behind the desk. Diana Johnson had learned long ago that dignity didn't cost a thing, but it was worth everything. As she guided her sons through the gleaming lobby of the Whitmore Enterprises headquarters, she kept her head high despite the heaviness in her chest. The security guard eyed them suspiciously as they handed back their visitor badges, a subtle reminder that they didn't belong in this world of glass and steel. Outside, the summer heat hit them like a wall. Diana checked her watch. She had exactly 45 minutes to get across town for her afternoon shift at Memorial Hospital, where she worked as a nursing assistant. We need to hurry, boys, she said, heading toward the bus stop. I can't be late again. Marcus and Michael matched her pace, their long legs easily keeping up with her hurried steps. At 17, they already towered over her 5'4" frame. "He never intended to help us, did he?" Marcus asked, his voice low but steady. Diana sighed. "Don't be quick to judge, Marcus. Mr. Whitmore is a businessman. He makes decisions based on what benefits his company." "But our app would benefit his company," Michael countered. "He just couldn't see past our skin color and address." Diana stopped walking and turned to face her sons. Even in the midst of disappointment, teaching moments couldn't be wasted. "Listen to me, both of you. That man's limitations are not yours to carry. Your brilliance doesn't diminish because someone fails to recognize it." A bus rumbled past, spewing exhaust into the humid air. Diana checked her watch again, anxiety tightening her chest. "We need to keep moving." As they continued toward the bus stop, Diana's mind drifted back to the day the twins were born. She had been just 23, barely finished with nursing school, when James walked out. "2 babies at once is too much," he'd said, as if the multiplication of their love had somehow diminished its value rather than expanded it. She'd been terrified, standing in their tiny apartment with 2 wailing infants and an emptiness where her future had once seemed certain. But fear had quickly given way to determination. She would work twice as hard, love twice as fiercely, and ensure her boys never felt half-loved or less than whole. The bus arrived, crowded with afternoon commuters. They squeezed on, Diana wedged between her sons, who instinctively positioned themselves as shields around her smaller frame, a habit they'd developed over the years. The bus lurched forward, carrying them back to their reality, miles away from the corporate towers of downtown. "Mom," Michael said quietly, "we still have those scholarship applications for the state college program, and Mr. Townsend mentioned a private tech investor who might be interested." Diana nodded, grateful for her son's resilience. "We'll work on those tonight, and I have Thursday off. We can go see Mr. Townsend then." Marcus pulled out his phone, already making notes. "I've been thinking about some revisions to our presentation based on what we learned today. We need to emphasize the market potential more clearly up front." The familiar sound of her son's planning soothed Diana's disappointment. They had always been like this, strategic, adaptable, and unfailingly supportive of each other. From the moment they could talk, they had communicated in their own twin language, building ideas together like master architects, each supplying the pieces the other might miss. 40 minutes later, Diana rushed through the staff entrance of Memorial Hospital, quickly changing into her scrubs. She had worked at Memorial for nearly 15 years, starting as an orderly while finishing her nursing assistant certification at night. The hospital was understaffed and overworked, but Diana found purpose in the chaos, a certain dignity in being needed. "You're cutting it close, DJ," said Marlene, the charge nurse, using Diana's workplace nickname. "Sorry, we had that meeting downtown," Diana replied, tying back her hair. Marlene's expression softened. "The Whitmore scholarship thing? How did it go?" Diana busied herself organizing supplies. "About as well as expected. They'll review our application." "Their loss," Marlene snorted. "Those boys of yours are going places with or without Whitmore's help." Diana smiled gratefully. Marlene had known the twins since they were toddlers, often watching them in the hospital daycare when Diana worked double shifts. She had been among the first to recognize their exceptional intelligence, advocating for them to be tested for the gifted program when they were just 5 years old. "Fourth floor is short-staffed," Marlene said, changing the subject. "They need help with admissions paperwork." Diana nodded and headed for the elevator, her mind still processing the day's disappointment. The twins were brilliant. Everyone who met them acknowledged that. Their teachers, the community center volunteers, even the intimidating principal at their high school regularly told Diana that Marcus and Michael were exceptional. By 13, they were taking advanced placement courses. By 15, they had developed their first app to help Diana manage her complex work schedule. When they presented her with the idea for their tutoring application, Diana had recognized its potential immediately. The twins had identified a crucial gap, peer-to-peer learning support for students who couldn't afford private tutors. They had built it from scratch, testing it first with their classmates, then expanding to the entire school with their principal's blessing. Richard Townsend, an old friend who ran several community programs in their neighborhood, had been the one to suggest approaching Whitmore Enterprises. "Gerald and I were roommates at Princeton," he'd explained. "He funds a few education initiatives. I think he'd be impressed by what the boys have created." Diana had been hesitant. She knew the statistics, the biases, the unwritten rules that governed spaces like the one Gerald Whitmore occupied. But the boys had been so excited, spending weeks perfecting their presentation, researching Whitmore Enterprises, and rehearsing potential questions. Now, as she helped an elderly patient fill out admission forms, Diana wondered if she had set them up for unnecessary disappointment. Had she been naive to think that talent alone would open doors? Her shift passed in a blur of patients, paperwork, and procedures. By the time she clocked out at midnight, exhaustion had settled deep in her bones. The night bus was nearly empty, allowing her to sink into a seat and close her eyes briefly. The medical bills from her bout with pneumonia earlier that year still loomed, and the rent increase notice she'd received last week added another layer of worry. When she unlocked the door to their small apartment, she found both boys asleep at the kitchen table, laptops open, papers spread between them. They had clearly been working on revisions to their presentation. Diana stood watching them for a moment, her heart swelling with pride and determination. She gently shook Marcus awake first. "Come on, baby. Bedtime." He blinked sleepily, immediately reaching to wake his brother. "Mom, we've been researching other potential sponsors. Look at this list." Diana shook her head, smiling despite her exhaustion. "Tomorrow. You both need sleep." As the twins shuffled off to their shared bedroom, Diana sat down at the table, looking over their work. Their dedication humbled her. From the day they were born, she had promised them a life of possibilities, not limitations. Regardless of what Gerald Whitmore or anyone else thought, she would keep that promise. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to Richard Townsend. Whitmore was a no. "Can we discuss other options on Thursday?" Then she gathered the scattered papers, carefully preserving her son's work before heading to bed herself. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities, new doors to knock on. Diana Johnson had never been one to quit, and she had raised her sons with the same persistence. Gerald Whitmore's rejection was just one no in a world where the right yes was still waiting to be found. Richard Townsend's office at the Riverside Community Center was a stark contrast to Gerald Whitmore's corporate sanctuary. Mismatched furniture, walls covered with children's artwork, and the perpetual scent of coffee created an atmosphere of warmth rather than intimidation. Diana and the twins sat across from Richard, who was reviewing their revised proposal with a furrowed brow. "Gerald really turned this down?" Richard asked, genuine surprise in his voice. "It's brilliant work." "He said they'd review it," Diana corrected gently. "But we all know what that means." Richard set the proposal down, leaning back in his creaking chair. At 62, he had the weathered face of someone who had spent decades fighting uphill battles for his community. The gray in his beard and the lines around his eyes spoke of both struggles and triumphs. "I misjudged Gerald," he said finally. "We were close in college, but people change. 25 years in corporate America will do that to you." Michael, who had been unusually quiet since their meeting with Whitmore, finally spoke up. "We've revised our approach, Mr. Townsend. We're looking at smaller investors now, maybe a crowdfunding campaign." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "Smart pivot, but I might have another option for you." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. "Elaine Chen. She runs a tech incubator focused on diverse founders. Graduated from MIT herself. Let me see if she has time to meet you." As Richard made the call, Diana watched her sons exchange one of their silent communications. A raised eyebrow from Marcus, a slight nod from Michael. They had developed this wordless language as toddlers, and it had only grown more sophisticated with age. "Great news. Richard announced, ending the call. "Elaine can see you tomorrow morning at 9. Her office is in the Innovation District." Marcus immediately pulled out his phone, likely mapping the bus route, Diana guessed. Michael was already taking notes, preparing questions. "Richard," Diana began hesitantly, "thank you for this. But I need to be realistic. MIT's program starts in 3 weeks. Even if Ms. Chen is interested, will there be enough time to secure funding?" Richard's eyes softened with understanding. "Diana, I've known these boys since they were building towers with blocks at the daycare center. If anyone can make the impossible happen in 3 weeks, it's Marcus and Michael." The twins straightened simultaneously, their determination palpable. "We'll make it work, Mom," Marcus assured her. "We always do." The next morning, Diana called in a rare favor at the hospital, swapping shifts to accompany her sons to the meeting with Elaine Chen. The Innovation District was a recently revitalized area of the city, filled with converted warehouses now housing tech startups and creative agencies. It was a world away from both their neighborhood and the corporate downtown where Whitmore Enterprises towered. Elaine Chen's incubator, Next Level Tech, occupied the 3rd floor of a former textile factory. The space was open and industrial, with exposed brick walls and clusters of young people working at communal tables. Elaine herself was nothing like Diana had expected. Small in stature but commanding in presence, she greeted them wearing jeans and a t-shirt that read, "Algorithms with Attitude." "Richard speaks highly of you two," she said, leading them to a quiet corner with couches instead of formal chairs. "He tells me you've built something special." The twins exchanged a glance before Marcus launched into their presentation. Diana watched as Elaine listened intently, occasionally asking sharp questions that demonstrated her technical expertise. Michael seamlessly took over when the discussion turned to the app's architecture, explaining their choices with confidence. "So Whitmore turned this down?" Elaine asked when they finished, shaking her head in disbelief. "His loss. This is exactly the kind of project we support at Next Level." Hope bloomed in Diana's chest, but she tempered it with caution. "What exactly does that mean, Ms. Chen?" "It means we're interested in providing seed funding and mentorship," Elaine replied, turning to the twins. "But I need to be clear. Our support comes with expectations. We don't just hand out money. We invest in founders who are committed to building something meaningful." "We're committed," Michael said firmly. "This isn't just a project for us. It's personal." Elaine nodded, her expression serious. "I can see that. Here's my proposal. A $50,000 seed investment to develop your app further, workspace here at Next Level, and mentorship from our network of tech professionals." Diana felt lightheaded. $50,000 was more money than she made in a year. "And MIT's program?" Marcus asked, ever focused on their immediate goal. "Consider it covered," Elaine said with a smile. "It's a legitimate business expense, professional development for our newest founders." The twins broke into identical grins, their usual composure cracking to reveal the teenagers they still were. "There's one more thing," Elaine continued, her tone becoming businesslike again. "We need to formalize your business structure immediately. That means incorporating, opening business accounts, and signing contracts. You'll need a guardian to co-sign since you're minors." Diana straightened her spine. "I'm their mother. I'll sign whatever's needed." Elaine smiled approvingly. "Perfect. My legal team can start the paperwork today. We'll aim to have everything finalized by next week, just in time for MIT." As they left Next Level, stepping into the summer sunshine, Diana felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in years, perhaps since the twins were born, she allowed herself to exhale fully. "I can't believe it," Marcus said, his voice filled with wonder. "We're really doing this." Michael nodded, his expression more measured but equally joyful. "We need to call Mr. Townsend and thank him." Diana pulled her sons into a tight embrace, right there on the sidewalk, not caring who saw her tears. "I am so proud of you both. So proud." The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Diana took extra shifts to cover household expenses while the twins were away at MIT. Elaine's legal team helped them incorporate as Twin Tech Solutions, with Diana as the adult signatory until the boys turned 18. Bank accounts were opened, contracts signed, and plans made for the fall when the twins would begin balancing their senior year of high school with their new roles as tech entrepreneurs. The day before they left for Cambridge, Diana found the twins in their bedroom, packing their suitcases. Michael was meticulously folding clothes while Marcus organized their tech equipment. The sight of them preparing to leave, even temporarily, created a bittersweet ache in Diana's heart. "Mom, we got you something," Marcus said, noticing her in the doorway. He pulled a small box from his desk drawer and handed it to her. Inside was a new smartphone, far nicer than the outdated model she had been using for years. "We've already set it up," Michael explained. "It has our app installed, plus some other features we thought you'd find useful for managing your schedule at the hospital." Diana turned the phone over in her hands, touched by their thoughtfulness. "It's wonderful, but you shouldn't be spending money on me. You need to save for your business." The twins exchanged another of their silent communications before Marcus spoke. "Mom, we added you to the payroll. You're officially Twin Tech's operations manager." Diana blinked in surprise. "What? No, I can't take money from your startup. That's not how this works." "Actually, it is," Michael countered. "We need someone to manage things while we're at MIT, and then during school hours when we get back. It's a legitimate position, and Elaine agreed it makes perfect business sense. The salary isn't much," Marcus added quickly, "but it's enough that you won't have to work double shifts at the hospital anymore." Diana sat down on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed. For 17 years, she had been the provider, the protector. Now her sons were creating a space for her in the future they were building. "We wouldn't be here without you," Michael said softly. "Everything we know about working hard and never giving up, that comes from you." Diana pulled them both close, these remarkable young men she had raised. "I love you both so much. Your father was a fool to walk away from you." Marcus grinned. "His loss, our gain," Michael finished. The next morning, Diana drove the used car they had recently purchased with part of their seed funding to Cambridge, Massachusetts. As she helped her sons settle into their dormitory for the summer program, she felt a strange mixture of emotions: pride, excitement, anxiety, and a touch of preemptive loneliness. "We'll call every night," Marcus promised, seeing her expression as she prepared to leave. "And we'll be home in 6 weeks," Michael added. "This is just the beginning, Mom." Diana nodded, straightening her shoulders. "The beginning of something amazing." She hugged them one last time before walking to the car, refusing to let them see her cry. They needed to focus on their opportunity, not worry about her. As she drove away from MIT's impressive campus, Diana allowed herself a moment of vindication. Gerald Whitmore had looked at her sons and seen risk, not potential. He had missed the chance to be part of their journey. It was his loss, and somehow that knowledge felt like justice. Back home, Diana placed the twins' revised proposal in a drawer, keeping it as a reminder of both rejection and redirection. Whitmore's dismissal had led them to Elaine Chen, who saw their value immediately. Perhaps someday, Diana thought, Gerald Whitmore would realize what he had turned away. The MIT Young Entrepreneurs Summer Program transformed Marcus and Michael in ways Diana hadn't anticipated. When they returned home 6 weeks later, they carried themselves differently, not just with confidence, but with a newfound sense of belonging in the world of innovation and technology. They spoke a language peppered with terms like scalability, market penetration, and user acquisition costs, casually referencing concepts that Diana struggled to follow. Their final week at MIT had culminated in a pitch competition, which they had won handily, earning an additional $25,000 in funding and invaluable connections with venture capitalists and tech industry veterans. Their tutoring app, now rebranded as PeerLift, had evolved significantly under the guidance of MIT professors and mentors. "We've completely rebuilt the algorithm," Marcus explained over dinner their first night home. "It now matches students based on learning styles and specific academic strengths, not just general subject knowledge." Michael nodded enthusiastically. "And we've added a gamification layer that incentivizes both tutors and students. Early testing shows it increases engagement by nearly 40%. Diana listened, amazed by her son's growth. "I'm so proud of you both. But I hope you're ready for your senior year. It starts in 3 weeks." The twins exchanged one of their looks. "About that," Marcus began cautiously, "we've been offered an opportunity to participate in a part-time remote learning program through MIT's Extended Education Department." "What does that mean exactly?" Diana asked, setting down her fork. "We'd complete our high school requirements online," Michael explained, "while taking undergraduate-level computer science courses through MIT. We'd only need to be on campus in Cambridge 1 weekend a month." Diana's immediate instinct was concern. "But what about your friends? Prom? All the normal senior year experiences?" Marcus laughed softly. "Mom, when have we ever been normal? Besides," Michael added, "this way we can balance school with developing Peerlift. Next Level is expecting our beta launch by December." Diana studied her sons' faces, recognizing the determination in their eyes. She had always encouraged them to reach for opportunities, and now they were doing exactly that. Who was she to stand in their way because of traditional expectations? "If this is what you want, I support you," she said finally. "But I have conditions. You will take breaks. You will sleep regular hours. And you will not miss your high school graduation even if you're taking college courses simultaneously." The twins grinned in unison. "Deal," they said together. The fall passed in a blur of activity. Diana continued working at the hospital, though she reduced her hours to fulfill her new role at Twintech Solutions. The small salary the twins had insisted on paying her, combined with her hospital income, allowed them a level of financial stability they had never experienced before. They moved from their cramped apartment to a modest 3-bedroom townhouse closer to the Innovation District, where the twins now spent most of their days working alongside other startups at Next Level. Diana converted the smallest bedroom into an office, where she managed the growing administrative demands of the business, scheduling meetings, handling correspondence, and organizing the boys' increasingly complex lives. By December, Peerlift launched its beta version in 3 local high schools, including the twins' former school. The results exceeded even their optimistic projections. Student users reported improved grades, and more surprisingly, increased confidence and engagement in their classes. Teachers noted a positive shift in classroom culture as peer tutoring normalized asking for help. "We need to start thinking about expansion," Michael said one evening, as the 3 of them reviewed the monthly progress reports. "The data clearly supports scaling to more schools." Marcus nodded, already typing notes on his laptop. "I'll contact those principals in the Springfield district who expressed interest. And we should revisit our server capacity. User numbers are growing faster than we anticipated." Diana watched them work, these young men who had once been tiny babies in her arms. At 17, they were already building something meaningful, something that helped other young people like themselves. "What about college applications?" she asked during a rare, quiet moment in late January. "Regular decision deadlines are coming up." The twins looked at each other, having one of their silent conversations. "We've already applied," Marcus admitted. "MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, and Georgia Tech. All excellent tech schools," Michael added quickly, seeing Diana's surprise. "But MIT is offering us a special entrepreneurship track that would allow us to continue developing Peerlift while studying." Diana felt a pang of something between pride and loss. Her sons were mapping out futures that would likely take them far from home. It was what she had always wanted for them, opportunities beyond what their neighborhood could offer. But the reality of their eventual departure was beginning to sink in. "I think that sounds wonderful," she said, forcing brightness into her voice. "When will you hear back?" "March for regular decisions," Marcus replied, "but MIT has already indicated they're very interested." The college acceptance letters arrived as predicted in March, with all 4 schools offering admission. MIT, as expected, presented the most attractive package: full scholarships for both twins, plus continued support for Peerlift through their entrepreneurship program. "It's the obvious choice," Michael said as they celebrated over a special dinner Diana had prepared, "though Stanford made a compelling case." Marcus nodded. "MIT has been invested in us from the beginning. It makes sense to continue that relationship." Diana raised her glass of sparkling cider. "To my brilliant sons and their bright futures. I always knew you were destined for greatness." The twins clinked their glasses against hers, but Michael's expression turned serious. "None of this would have happened without you, Mom. Your sacrifices made everything possible." "And we haven't forgotten that," Marcus added with unusual solemnity. "We have plans for the future, plans that include you." Diana shook her head, smiling. "My only plan is to see you both succeed and be happy. That's all I've ever wanted." As spring bloomed, Peerlift continued to grow. Elaine Chen connected the twins with a marketing consultant who helped them refine their brand and outreach strategy. By April, they had expanded to 15 schools across 3 districts, with a waiting list of administrators eager to implement the program. Their high school graduation in June was a proud moment for Diana. Watching her sons cross the stage to receive their diplomas, she remembered the countless nights of helping with homework at the kitchen table after long hospital shifts, the parent-teacher conferences she had never missed despite exhaustion, the times she had gone without so they could have what they needed. "Diana Johnson," a voice interrupted her memories as the ceremony concluded. She turned to find Principal Matthews approaching. "Your boys are extraordinary. I've been in education for 30 years and I've never seen minds like theirs." Diana smiled, the pride almost painful in its intensity. "Thank you for believing in them." "The world is going to know their names someday," he predicted, glancing toward where Marcus and Michael stood surrounded by well-wishers. "Mark my words." The summer before college was devoted to preparing Peerlift for a major expansion. With the help of Next Level's resources, the twins secured additional funding from angel investors impressed by their early success. They hired their first employees, 2 computer science graduates to help with development, and a former teacher to serve as educational consultant. Diana watched with amazement as her sons transitioned from students to employers, handling their new responsibilities with a maturity beyond their years. She worried sometimes that they were missing out on typical teenage experiences, but they seemed genuinely fulfilled by the path they had chosen. "Are you nervous about MIT?" she asked as they packed for their move to Cambridge in late August. Marcus looked up from his suitcase. "A little. The academics will be challenging." "I'm more concerned about balancing school with running the company," Michael admitted. "But we've worked out a schedule that should be manageable." Diana sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the familiar mixture of pride and impending loss. "Promise me you'll take care of each other, and that you'll call home regularly." "We promise," they said in unison, the way they had since childhood. The day Diana drove them to MIT, helping them settle into their dormitory, she fought back tears. The campus was bustling with activity as freshmen arrived from around the world, parents helping unload cars and saying goodbyes. "We'll be home for Thanksgiving," Marcus reassured her, seeing her expression. "And we've set up video calls every Sunday," Michael added. "Plus, you'll be visiting monthly for board meetings at Next Level." Diana nodded, pulling them both into a tight embrace. "I love you both so much. I can't wait to see what you accomplish here." As she drove home alone, Diana allowed herself to cry freely. For 18 years, her life had revolved entirely around her sons. Now they were beginning a new chapter, and she needed to do the same. The part-time role at Twin Tech Solutions would continue, but she had also enrolled in online courses to finally complete her nursing degree, a dream she had deferred when the twins were born. Her phone buzzed with a text message at a stoplight. It was a photo of Marcus and Michael in their dorm room giving thumbs up, with a message, "Don't worry, Mom. We've got this. And so do you." Diana smiled through her tears, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. Her boys were going to be just fine. And for the first time in 18 years, she had the freedom to focus on her own dreams, too. Gerald Whitmore stepped out of his chauffeured Bentley, buttoning his tailored suit jacket as he approached the gleaming entrance of Whitmore Enterprises headquarters. At 70, he moved with the deliberate confidence of a man accustomed to command, though his steps had slowed slightly over the years. The morning security staff snapped to attention as he passed, offering respectful greetings that he acknowledged with the barest nod. In the 20 years since he had turned away Diana Johnson and her twin sons, Whitmore Enterprises had nearly tripled in size. Acquisitions, mergers, and strategic expansions had transformed the company from a regional powerhouse to a global technology conglomerate with interests spanning software development, telecommunications, and artificial intelligence research. Gerald's private elevator whisked him to the executive floor, where his latest assistant, a poised young woman named Taylor, waited with his schedule and a cup of black coffee prepared exactly to his specifications. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore," she said, falling into step beside him as he strode toward his office. "The board meeting has been moved to 11. Mr. Chen from Singapore will be joining via video conference. And your son called. He'd like to speak with you before the quarterly review this afternoon." Gerald suppressed a sigh at the mention of his son. At 35, Bradley Whitmore was technically the company's chief operating officer, but the title was largely ceremonial, a concession to family obligation rather than a recognition of genuine talent. Bradley had inherited his father's ambition, but none of his business acumen or work ethic. "Tell Bradley I'll see him at 2, Gerald replied, entering his office and setting his briefcase on the expansive mahogany desk. "And have legal send up the paperwork on the Nexus Tech acquisition. I want to review it before the board meeting." Taylor nodded efficiently. "Already on your desk, sir. And marketing sent the mock-ups for the new campaign. They're awaiting your approval." Left alone, Gerald settled into his chair and surveyed his domain. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of the city skyline, much of which now bore the Whitmore name or influence in some form. On his office walls hung even more awards and accolades than 20 years prior, along with photographs of Gerald with 2 presidents, various celebrities, and global business leaders. He turned to his computer, scanning through the morning's financial news. Whitmore Enterprises stock had risen another 2 points in overnight trading, adding millions to the company's market capitalization. It was a pattern Gerald had grown accustomed to: success breeding further success, wealth accumulating wealth. Yet despite these outward markers of achievement, a subtle unease had begun to shadow Gerald in recent years. He found himself increasingly irritable with Bradley's entitled attitude and poor business decisions. His third marriage was showing the strain of his perpetual work focus, with his much younger wife spending more time at their vacation properties than at their primary residence. Even his legendary focus had started to waver, his mind occasionally drifting during important meetings. His doctor had suggested it was simply age catching up with him, recommending more rest and perhaps considering retirement. Gerald had dismissed the advice outright. Retirement was for those who had nothing left to contribute, and Gerald Whitmore was not that man. Not yet. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Taylor entered with a stack of reports and correspondence requiring his attention. "The Mitchell Foundation called again about your RSVP to their annual gala," she mentioned as she organized the documents on his desk. "It's their 20th anniversary event, and they're hoping you'll reconsider and attend." Gerald frowned. He had declined precisely because it was their 20th anniversary. Elizabeth Mitchell had been his most serious relationship before his first marriage, and their parting had been acrimonious. Her subsequent creation of a foundation dedicated to supporting underprivileged youth in technology fields felt, to Gerald, like a pointed criticism of his own business practices. "My answer remains no," he said firmly. "Schedule something else for that evening if necessary." Taylor nodded without comment, having learned early in her tenure that Gerald's decisions were rarely open to reconsideration. The morning proceeded with its usual regimented efficiency. Gerald reviewed reports, made decisive notations, and held brief meetings with key department heads. He approved the marketing materials with minimal changes and prepared his remarks for the board meeting. At 11, he entered the boardroom with the commanding presence that had become his trademark. The board members, mostly older men with similar backgrounds to Gerald's, with a few token additions for diversity, greeted him with deference. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gerald began, taking his seat at the head of the table, "our third quarter results have exceeded projections once again. The Nexus Tech acquisition is proceeding as planned, and our expansion into emerging markets continues to outpace competitors." The meeting progressed smoothly, with various executives presenting their departmental updates. Gerald listened with practiced attention, asking pointed questions and offering authoritative guidance where needed. This was the environment in which he thrived, controlled, predictable, with everyone playing their assigned roles. When the meeting concluded, Gerald returned to his office for a light lunch at his desk, as was his custom. Taylor had arranged for his usual, a grilled chicken salad with dressing on the side and sparkling water. "Your son is here," she announced after he had finished eating. Gerald checked his watch with a frown. "He's early. Give me 5 minutes, then send him in." Bradley Whitmore entered his father's office with the casual confidence of someone who had never truly had to earn his position. Tall and fit like his father had been in his younger years, Bradley nevertheless lacked the gravitas that came from building something from nothing. He had been born into privilege and had never known any other reality. "Dad," he greeted, dropping into a chair without waiting for an invitation. "The quarterly review packet is missing the projections for the West Coast expansion. I need those numbers before the presentation." Gerald regarded his son coolly. "The projections aren't finalized. Stevens is still running the analysis." Bradley's expression hardened. "I need them today. The executive team expects a complete overview." "The executive team will receive accurate information when it's ready, not before," Gerald replied, his tone making it clear the matter wasn't open for debate. "Is there anything else?" A flash of frustration crossed Bradley's face. "Actually, yes. I've been looking at our education initiatives and I think we're missing opportunities for meaningful impact. We're writing checks, but we're not creating actual change." Gerald raised an eyebrow. Bradley rarely showed interest in the company's philanthropic efforts, which were primarily managed by the PR department as reputation-enhancing exercises. "What exactly are you proposing?" Gerald asked, genuine curiosity momentarily overriding his usual dismissive attitude toward his son's ideas. Bradley leaned forward. "I've been researching this educational technology company called PeerLift. They've developed a peer-to-peer tutoring platform that's showing remarkable results in underserved communities. Their success metrics are off the charts: improved test scores, higher graduation rates, increased college admissions." "And?" Gerald prompted, uncertain where this was heading. "I think we should acquire them," Bradley stated. "Their technology would complement our existing education portfolio, and their community focus would significantly enhance our corporate social responsibility profile." Gerald frowned. "I've never heard of PeerLift. How established are they?" "They've been around for about 7 years," Bradley explained. "Started small but expanded rapidly. They're in over 500 schools now across 40 states. Privately held, founded by twin brothers who developed the initial concept when they were still in high school." Something tugged at Gerald's memory, a fleeting recollection of another set of twins with an educational technology idea. But he dismissed it as coincidence. He had reviewed thousands of proposals and met countless entrepreneurs over the decades. "Send me the information," Gerald said, reaching for his phone as it began to vibrate. We'll discuss it after the quarterly review." Bradley nodded, recognizing the dismissal. As he left the office, Gerald answered the call from his wife, half listening as she complained about the contractor delays at their Aspen home. His mind had already moved on to the next item on his agenda, the quarterly review presentation where he would once again demonstrate Whitmore Enterprises' continued dominance under his leadership. The afternoon passed quickly, filled with meetings and decisions. By 6 o'clock, most of the executive floor had emptied, but Gerald remained at his desk, reviewing the materials Bradley had sent over about Peerlift. The company's growth trajectory was indeed impressive, and their user testimonials spoke of genuine impact rather than the superficial metrics many educational technology companies touted. Somewhat grudgingly, Gerald had to admit that Bradley might have identified a worthwhile acquisition target. He made a note to have his business development team conduct a preliminary valuation and competitive analysis. As he was preparing to leave for the day, his phone rang again. The display showed Richard Townsend's name, a blast from the past. Gerald hadn't spoken to his former college roommate in years, though they had maintained sporadic contact through charitable functions and alumni events. "Richard," Gerald answered, genuine warmth creeping into his voice. Despite their different life paths, Richard was one of the few people from Gerald's past that he still respected. "This is unexpected." "Gerald," Richard's familiar voice replied, "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Just wrapping up for the day. What can I do for you?" "I'm calling about the Mitchell Foundation's anniversary gala next month," Richard said. "Elizabeth mentioned you declined the invitation. I was hoping to convince you to reconsider." Gerald's warmth cooled slightly. "I have prior commitments." "Cancel them," Richard said bluntly. "This is important, Gerald. The foundation is honoring some remarkable young entrepreneurs who started with nothing and have created technology that's genuinely changing lives. Your presence would mean a lot, both to Elizabeth and to these young innovators." "Richard, I appreciate the thought, but—" "It's been 20 years, Gerald," Richard interrupted. "Whatever happened between you and Elizabeth is ancient history. This isn't about your past relationship. It's about supporting the next generation of technology leaders." Gerald sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Richard had always known how to appeal to his sense of legacy and influence. "Who are these young entrepreneurs you're so eager for me to meet?" "They've developed an educational platform called Peerlift," Richard replied. "Perhaps you've heard of it? It's making waves in the ed-tech sector." Gerald straightened in his chair, suddenly alert. "Peerlift? Twin founders? Started when they were in high school?" "That's right," Richard confirmed, surprise evident in his voice. "Marcus and Michael Johnson. Do you know them?" The names hit Gerald like a physical blow. Johnson. Twin boys named Marcus and Michael. Educational technology. The memory crystallized with perfect clarity. Diana Johnson and her sons in his office 20 years ago presenting their peer tutoring concept. The boys he had dismissed without a second thought. The potential he had failed to recognize. "Gerald, are you still there?" Richard's voice pulled him back to the present. "Yes," Gerald replied, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "I'll attend the gala." After ending the call, Gerald sat motionless at his desk, processing the implications of this revelation. The twins he had turned away had succeeded spectacularly without his help. They had built exactly what they had promised, a system to help disadvantaged students achieve academic success through peer support. And now, in a twist of irony that wasn't lost on him, his son was advocating for Whitmore Enterprises to acquire their company. Gerald pulled up the Peerlift website again, this time looking closely at the About Us page. There they were, Marcus and Michael Johnson, now in their late 30s, but with the same serious expressions and intelligent eyes he remembered from 20 years ago. Beside them in one photo stood a dignified woman with a warm smile, Diana Johnson, he presumed, though the years had changed her as they had changed him. For the first time in decades, Gerald Whitmore felt something uncomfortably close to regret. He had misjudged those young men based on preconceptions and biases he would never have admitted to harboring. He had missed an opportunity not just for his company, but to be part of something genuinely meaningful. As he finally left his office that evening, Gerald found himself wondering what might have been different if he had said yes all those years ago. The Johnson twins' corner office at Peerlift headquarters occupied the top floor of a converted industrial building in Cambridge's technology corridor. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the space with natural light, illuminating walls adorned with framed articles chronicling their journey, awards recognizing their innovations, and photographs capturing milestone moments over the past 2 decades. Marcus Johnson stood at the expansive glass wall gazing out at the Boston skyline while his brother finished a video call with their West Coast team. At 37, the twins had retained their identical appearance, though they had long since abandoned the matching clothing of their youth. Today, Marcus wore a charcoal suit with a blue tie, while Michael had opted for dark jeans and a tailored blazer, a small visual distinction that helped colleagues tell them apart. "Seattle launch is confirmed for next month," Michael announced, ending the call. "That will bring us to all 50 states." Marcus turned from the window, a smile spreading across his face. "Mom's going to love that. She's been tracking our state-by-state expansion on that map in her office." The mention of their mother brought matching expressions of fondness to their faces. Diana Johnson had been appointed Peerlift's Chief Community Officer 5 years earlier, a position created specifically to leverage her unique combination of compassion and pragmatism. She now led all their community engagement initiatives, ensuring the company's rapid growth never came at the expense of its core mission. "Speaking of Mom," Michael said, checking his watch, "she should be landing in an hour. Do you want to pick her up, or should I send a car?" "I'll go," Marcus replied. "I could use the break. The Mitchell Foundation presentation is as ready as it's going to be, and legal has signed off on all the partnership agreements." Michael nodded, turning to his computer to check their shared calendar. "Perfect. That gives me time to review the quarterly impact report before our board call at 4. Their silent efficiency was a well-choreographed dance perfected over decades of working together. From their teenage years building the first prototype of Peerlift in their small bedroom to now leading a company with over 200 employees and millions of users, Marcus and Michael had maintained the unique synchronicity that came from being not just brothers, but twins who had faced every challenge side by side. "Before you go," Michael said, "we received another acquisition inquiry. This one's different." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Different how? We've turned down a dozen offers in the past 3 years." "It's from Whitmore Enterprises." The name hung in the air between them, laden with significance. Neither brother had forgotten their meeting with Gerald Whitmore 20 years earlier, the dismissal that had initially crushed their spirits but ultimately redirected them toward greater opportunities. "Interesting timing," Marcus mused, reaching for his jacket. "Right before the Mitchell Foundation Gala where we're being honored." Michael's expression remained neutral, but his eyes reflected a calculation that his brother immediately recognized. Could be coincidence, or it could be that someone at Whitmore finally realized what they missed out on. "Either way," Marcus said, "the answer is the same as it's always been. Peerlift isn't for sale." "I'll draft the usual polite decline," Michael agreed. "But I did some digging after their inquiry came in. Gerald Whitmore is still CEO, though there's speculation he might step down soon. His son Bradley has been taking on more public-facing responsibilities." "I remember reading something about that," Marcus said, checking his phone for the time. "Whitmore Sr. must be what, 70 now? Doesn't seem the type to retire willingly." 71 in December, according to their company bio, Michael confirmed. "The son seems cut from different cloth. He's been pushing the company toward more socially conscious initiatives." Marcus buttoned his jacket, preparing to leave. "Well, he'll have to find another way to boost their reputation. We didn't build Peerlift to become a subsidiary of some corporate giant, especially not Whitmore's." "Agreed," Michael said, already turning back to his work. "Say hi to Mom for me." Tell her I'll see her at dinner." The drive to Logan Airport gave Marcus time to reflect on the journey that had brought them to this moment. After graduating from MIT with dual degrees in computer science and business, he and Michael had devoted themselves entirely to growing Peerlift. The summers of their college years had been spent refining the platform, securing additional funding, and expanding to new school districts. Their big break had come during their junior year when a national education journal published a study documenting Peerlift's remarkable impact on student achievement in underserved communities. Suddenly, school districts across the country were calling, and investors were clamoring to get involved. But the twins had been selective about both expansion and investment, maintaining majority control of the company and insisting that every new implementation include support for students who couldn't afford premium features. Their business model had evolved to include partnerships with foundations and corporations who sponsored access for low-income schools, ensuring the platform remained true to its original mission of educational equity. Through it all, Diana had been their anchor and advocate. She had completed her nursing degree while the twins were at MIT, but as Peerlift grew, she had gradually transitioned from healthcare to working with the company full-time. Her experience in both fields had proven invaluable as they developed features to support students with learning differences and health challenges. Marcus spotted his mother immediately as she emerged from the terminal. At 57, Diana Johnson carried herself with the quiet dignity that had always been her hallmark, though success had softened some of the worry lines that had once marked her face. Her simple elegance, a well-tailored pantsuit and minimal jewelry, reflected the woman she had always been, practical, unpretentious, and focused on what truly mattered. "Mom!" Marcus called, waving from the pickup area. Diana's face lit up at the sight of her son. She quickened her pace, pulling him into a warm embrace when she reached him. "Marcus, I thought Michael might send a car. This is a lovely surprise." "He's finishing up some work before our board call," Marcus explained, taking her carry-on bag. "He'll see us at dinner. How was your trip?" Diana had been in Chicago for the past week, overseeing the launch of a new community partnership program that paired Peerlift students with local businesses for mentorship opportunities. "Incredibly successful," she replied as they walked to his car. "The Chicago team exceeded our participation targets by 30%. We already have businesses asking to join the next cohort." Marcus smiled, feeling the familiar surge of pride in their collective work. "That's fantastic, Mom. Your community engagement model is revolutionizing how we implement in new cities." Diana waved away the compliment as Marcus loaded her bag into the trunk of his Tesla. "I'm just building on the foundation you boys created. Speaking of which, are you ready for the Mitchell Foundation Gala tomorrow night? Elizabeth called me last week. They're expecting record attendance." "We're ready," Marcus assured her, opening the passenger door. "Michael finalized the presentation this morning, and our impact report for the year is the strongest it's ever been." As they drove toward Cambridge, Diana updated Marcus on her meetings in Chicago while he shared the latest company developments, including the new acquisition inquiry from Whitmore Enterprises. "Gerald Whitmore," Diana mused, shaking her head slightly. "I haven't thought about him in years." "Really?" Marcus asked, glancing at her with surprise. "I would have thought his rejection might have left a lasting impression." Diana smiled, her eyes reflecting the wisdom of her years. "When you've raised two brilliant, determined sons as a single mother, you learn to focus on the people who say yes, not those who say no. Richard Townsend believed in you. Elaine Chen invested in you. Those are the names I remember." Marcus nodded, once again struck by his mother's remarkable perspective. Where others might have harbored resentment, Diana had always chosen to channel her energy toward positive action. "Besides," she continued, "that rejection led us to next level, which was exactly where you needed to be. Sometimes the no is just redirecting you to the right yes." "You always say that," Marcus chuckled, recognizing one of her favorite mantras. "Because it's always true," Diana replied simply. When they arrived at Peerlift headquarters, Employees greeted Diana with genuine warmth. She knew most by name, having made it a point to connect personally with team members at all levels of the organization. Several approached with updates on projects she had been involved with before her Chicago trip. "Mrs. Johnson, the Community Advisory Board materials are ready for your review," a young woman called as they passed. "I'll stop by later today, Sophia," Diana promised. "And how's your mother doing after her surgery?" "Much better, thank you for asking." Marcus observed these interactions with quiet appreciation. His mother's authentic interest in people had become woven into Peerlift's corporate culture, creating an environment where employees felt valued as whole persons, not just for their professional contributions. In the executive suite, Michael was just concluding the board call when they arrived. He rose immediately to greet Diana, embracing her with the same enthusiasm as his brother had at the airport. "Perfect timing," he said. "I was just about to order dinner. The team sent over the final numbers for the Chicago launch. They're incredible, Mom." Diana beamed with pride. "The team did all the heavy lifting. I just helped connect the right people." "That's always been your superpower," Marcus said, moving to the office kitchenette to prepare coffee. "Connecting people who need each other." The three Johnsons spent the evening reviewing preparations for the Mitchell Foundation Gala, where Peerlift would be recognized for its transformative impact on educational equity. The foundation was awarding them a $5 million grant to expand their programs internationally, beginning with pilot projects in underserved communities across South America and Africa. "I've been thinking," Diana said as they finished their meal, "about how far we've come from that day we sat in Gerald Whitmore's office with our little presentation folder." The twins exchanged a glance, surprised by her mention of that day for the second time. "What brought that to mind?" Michael asked curiously. Diana shrugged lightly. "Maybe it's the symmetry of it all. 20 years ago, we were asking for help to develop your idea. Tomorrow night, one of the largest educational foundations in the country is giving you $5 million to expand that same idea globally." She smiled, her eyes misting slightly. Life has a way of coming full circle. Marcus reached across the table to squeeze his mother's hand. "None of this would have happened without you, Mom. You've been our foundation from day one." "And our greatest advocate," Michael added. "Remember how you rearranged your entire work schedule to take us to that meeting with Elaine Chen?" Diana laughed softly. "I remember being terrified that I was making the wrong decision, encouraging two 17-year-old boys to start a company instead of focusing solely on college." "Best decision ever," the twins said in unison, falling back into a childhood habit that still emerged occasionally. Later that evening, as Diana settled into the guest suite Peerlift maintained for her frequent visits, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The struggles, the late nights, the moments of doubt, all had been worth it to see her sons fulfill their potential while creating something that helped others do the same. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Elizabeth Mitchell. "Can't wait to see you all tomorrow night. P.S. You'll never guess who RSVP'd at the last minute. Gerald Whitmore." Diana stared at the message, a complex mixture of emotions washing over her. After 20 years, they would once again be in the same room with the man who had dismissed her son's potential. But this time, the dynamics would be entirely different. She typed a quick reply, "Looking forward to it. And that is interesting news indeed." Diana set her phone aside, deciding not to mention Whitmore's attendance to Marcus and Michael just yet. Tomorrow night would bring its own revelations, and her sons had earned every moment of recognition that awaited them. Nothing, and no one, would diminish that achievement. The Mitchell Foundation's 20th anniversary gala transformed the historic Fairmont Hotel ballroom into a glittering showcase of philanthropy and innovation. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over elegantly dressed attendees, while interactive displays along the perimeter highlighted 2 decades of the Foundation's impact on education and technology access. Diana Johnson stood in the hotel suite's bathroom, applying the finishing touches to her makeup. She had chosen a deep blue evening gown for the occasion, a far cry from the simple dress she had worn to Whitmore Enterprises 20 years earlier. The woman reflected in the mirror had the same determined eyes but carried herself with the confidence that came from watching her greatest dreams materialize. A soft knock at the door was followed by Marcus's voice. "Mom? The car will be here in 15 minutes. "I'm almost ready," she called back, securing a pair of sapphire earrings, a gift from her sons on her 50th birthday. When she emerged from the bathroom, both twins were waiting in the suite's sitting area, resplendent in matching tuxedos. Despite their usual preference for distinctive clothing, they had decided that tonight's symmetry was fitting, a visual reminder of their shared journey. "You look beautiful, Mom," Michael said, rising to his feet. Marcus nodded in agreement. "Absolutely stunning." Diana felt a swell of emotion as she regarded her sons, these remarkable men she had raised through years of struggle and sacrifice. "And you two look exactly like I always imagined you would when you were little boys playing business meeting at the kitchen table with your construction paper briefcases." The twins laughed at the memory. "Except now our briefcases are real," Michael noted. "And considerably more expensive," Marcus added with a grin. Their easy banter was interrupted by a text alert on Diana's phone. She glanced at the screen, then looked up with a carefully neutral expression. "I should mention something before we go downstairs. Elizabeth texted me last night that Gerald Whitmore RSVP'd to the gala." The twins exchanged a quick glance, their mental connection almost visible as they processed this information. "Interesting," Marcus said finally. "Given the acquisition inquiry, I suppose it makes sense." Michael's expression was more calculating. "Do you think it's coincidence, or did he know we'd be there?" "Elizabeth mentioned our names are prominently featured in all the promotional materials," Diana replied, "so he must know." A moment of silence fell as they each contemplated the implications of potentially encountering the man who had dismissed them 2 decades earlier. "Well," Marcus said decisively, "this changes nothing about tonight. We're being honored for our work, and that's what matters." Michael nodded in agreement. "Exactly. If anything, it's fitting that he'll witness firsthand what he missed out on." Diana studied her sons with pride. There was no bitterness in their voices, no desire for vindication, only the calm confidence of men who had proven their worth through actions rather than words. "Let's enjoy this evening," she said, gathering her clutch purse. "It's a celebration of everything you've built." The hotel ballroom was already filled with guests when they arrived. Elizabeth Mitchell, elegant in her 60s with silver hair and a commanding presence, immediately approached to greet them. "Diana," she exclaimed, embracing her warmly, "and Marcus and Michael, you all look wonderful." After exchanging pleasantries, Elizabeth led them through the crowd, making strategic introductions to Foundation board members, potential partners, and influential supporters. Diana noticed how people responded to her sons with genuine respect and interest, a far cry from the skepticism they had once faced as teenage entrepreneurs from a struggling neighborhood. "The presentation will begin after dinner," Elizabeth explained, guiding them toward the VIP section. "We've prepared a video showcasing Peerlift's impact, followed by the grant announcement. Then you'll have about 10 minutes for remarks." As they took their seats at the head table, Diana scanned the room, unconsciously searching for Gerald Whitmore among the crowd. She spotted him at a table near the stage, still imposing despite his age, his white hair adding to his distinguished appearance. Beside him sat a younger man who bore a striking resemblance, presumably his son. Dinner proceeded with the polished efficiency of high-end charity events. Between courses, Elizabeth rose to welcome the attendees and outline the evening's program. "The Mitchell Foundation was created 20 years ago with a simple mission," she began, her voice resonating through the ballroom. "To identify and support innovations that expand educational opportunities for all young people, regardless of their circumstances." As she continued, highlighting key accomplishments and acknowledging major donors, Diana noticed Gerald Whitmore watching the stage with focused attention. He showed no sign of recognizing her or her sons from this distance, though he would certainly see them clearly during the presentation. And now, Elizabeth concluded, I'm delighted to introduce the centerpiece of tonight's celebration, our Educational Innovation honorees, whose work exemplifies everything our foundation stands for. The lights dimmed, and a professionally produced video began playing on large screens throughout the ballroom. It opened with statistics about educational inequality in America, then transitioned to the story of PeerLift, beginning with two teenage twins developing a peer tutoring app in their small apartment. Diana felt a surge of emotion as photographs appeared on screen. Marcus and Michael at 17, working at their shared desk, the three of them celebrating at their MIT program graduation, the opening of their first official office at Next Level Tech. The narrative traced PeerLift's growth from a small startup to a platform serving millions of students across the country. When the video ended, Elizabeth returned to the podium. It is my great pleasure to announce that the Mitchell Foundation is awarding PeerLift a $5 million grant to expand their transformative work globally. Applause filled the ballroom as Elizabeth invited Marcus, Michael, and Diana to join her on stage. As they made their way forward, Diana caught Gerald Whitmore's expression, a complex mixture of recognition and something that might have been regret flickering across his face as he realized exactly who was being honored. On stage, Elizabeth presented them with a ceremonial check, then stepped aside for Marcus to speak. He approached the microphone with the quiet confidence that had become his trademark in public appearances. "Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you to the Mitchell Foundation for this extraordinary opportunity," he began. 20 years ago, my brother and I had an idea that students could be powerful resources for each other's learning, and that technology could facilitate those connections across barriers of geography, economics, and social circumstance. Michael stepped forward to continue seamlessly, their practiced coordination evident. What began as a simple app has grown into a platform that now serves over 3 million students in all 50 states. But numbers only tell part of the story. The real impact of PeerLift can be seen in the individual success stories, the first-generation college students, the improved graduation rates, the communities transformed through educational empowerment. Marcus returned to the microphone. With this generous grant, we'll begin our global expansion, starting with pilot programs in 10 countries where educational resources are most needed. Our goal is to reach 5 million international students within the next 3 years. Then, in a departure from their planned remarks, Marcus gestured toward Diana. But before we conclude, we want to acknowledge the person who made all of this possible, our mother, Diana Johnson. Diana blinked in surprise as Michael gently guided her to the center of the stage. Many of you know Diana as PeerLift's Chief Community Officer, Michael continued. But 20 years ago, she was a single mother working double shifts as a nursing assistant to support 2 teenage boys with big dreams. Marcus's voice filled with emotion as he added, "Every opportunity we've had, every door that opened for us, began with her sacrifice and unwavering belief in our potential." The spotlight shifted to Diana, who found herself facing a room full of the country's most influential philanthropists and business leaders. In the front row, Gerald Whitmore was watching intently, his expression unreadable. Diana hadn't prepared to speak, but as she looked out at the audience, she found the words coming naturally. "Thank you, Marcus and Michael. I'm overwhelmed by this recognition, but the truth is, my sons made my job easy. They were born with brilliant minds and compassionate hearts. All I did was make sure those gifts had room to grow." She paused, her gaze briefly meeting Gerald Whitmore's across the distance. "We faced many closed doors on our journey, but what I taught my sons, what I still believe, is that rejection is often just redirection. Each no led us to the right yes at the right time. And now, 20 years later, those boys who once worked at our kitchen table are changing education around the world." The applause that followed was thunderous, many in the audience rising to their feet. Diana saw Elizabeth Mitchell wiping away tears, and even Gerald Whitmore had stood, his expression now clearly one of respect and perhaps remorse. As they left the stage, Elizabeth announced a brief intermission before dancing would begin. The Johnsons were immediately surrounded by well-wishers offering congratulations and business cards. Diana noticed Gerald Whitmore and his son moving purposefully through the crowd in their direction. "I think we're about to have a reunion," she murmured to Marcus, who followed her gaze and nodded almost imperceptibly to Michael. Before Whitmore could reach them, Elizabeth appeared with a photographer. "We need some photos for the Foundation website and press release," she explained, positioning them near a Mitchell Foundation backdrop. The photography session created a natural buffer, allowing them to graciously acknowledge Whitmore's presence with a nod while remaining engaged with the photographer's directions. Diana was secretly grateful for the temporary reprieve. 20 years had passed, but the memory of that dismissive meeting remained vivid. When the photographs were complete, Gerald Whitmore finally made his approach, his son at his side. Up close, Diana could see the years had weathered him considerably. Though still imposing, he moved more carefully, and deep lines marked his face. "Mr. and Mr. Johnson," he greeted formally, extending his hand to Marcus first, then Michael. "Congratulations on your well-deserved recognition. Your achievements are truly remarkable." The twins accepted his handshake with professional courtesy. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore," Marcus replied, his tone neutral but not cold. "And Mrs. Johnson," Whitmore continued, turning to Diana. "It's been a long time." Diana met his gaze steadily. "Yes, it has. 20 years, I believe." A flicker of discomfort crossed Whitmore's face at her precise recollection. "Allow me to introduce my son, Bradley Whitmore, our Chief Operating Officer." Bradley stepped forward with a much warmer smile than his father's. "It's an honor to meet you all. I've been following Peerlift's work for some time now. What you've built is extraordinary." "Thank you," Michael replied, seeming to assess the younger Whitmore with interest. "We're particularly proud of our impact metrics in underserved communities." "That's exactly what caught my attention," Bradley said enthusiastically. "Your retention rates and outcome improvements are unparalleled in the edtech sector." As Bradley engaged the twins in conversation about Peerlift's technical innovations, Gerald Whitmore turned his attention more fully to Diana. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, his voice lowered for privacy, "I owe you an apology. 20 years ago, I failed to recognize the potential standing right in front of me. It was a significant error in judgment." Diana studied him carefully, noting the genuine regret in his eyes. "Mr. Whitmore, I don't hold grudges. Everything worked out exactly as it should have. Nevertheless," he persisted, "I was wrong. And watching your family receive this honor tonight has made that abundantly clear." Before Diana could respond, a photographer approached, asking if they would mind a group photo for the business section of the Boston Globe. The Mitchell Foundation honorees with Gerald Whitmore would make a compelling image, the photographer explained. Diana exchanged quick glances with her sons, who nodded their agreement. As they positioned themselves for the photograph, the Johnson family standing proudly alongside the Whitmores, Diana couldn't help but appreciate the perfect symmetry of the moment. 20 years ago, they had been dismissed from Whitmore's office. Tonight, they stood as equals, their success undeniable, their future boundless. The camera flashed, capturing an image that would appear in the next morning's paper and, though none of them knew it yet, on the cover of Business Week's special innovation issue the following month, the photograph that would bring everything full circle in a way none of them could have anticipated. 3 weeks after the Mitchell Foundation Gala, Gerald Whitmore's morning followed its usual regimented pattern. He arrived at Whitmore Enterprises headquarters precisely at 7:30, received his schedule and coffee from Taylor, and settled at his desk to review the overnight business reports. The familiarity of the routine was comforting, a counterbalance to the unsettled feeling that had lingered since encountering the Johnson family at the gala. Gerald had replayed that evening countless times in his mind, Diana Johnson's dignified presence, the twins' remarkable poise and accomplishment, and most uncomfortably, the stark realization of his own misjudgment 20 years earlier. He had dismissed those boys based on preconceptions that he now recognized as both unfounded and unconscionable. "Mr. Whitmore," Taylor's voice came through the intercom, interrupting his thoughts. "Your son is here to see you. He says it's important." Gerald frowned at the unexpected visit. "Send him in." Bradley entered with unusual energy, a rolled magazine in his hand and excitement evident in his expression. "Dad, have you seen this month's Business Week?" "Not yet," Gerald replied, gesturing to the stack of publications on his desk awaiting review. "Why?" Bradley unfurled the magazine and placed it on the desk, revealing the cover. "Because we're in it. Well, sort of." Gerald froze as he took in the image before him. The photograph from the Mitchell Foundation Gala dominated the cover, the Johnson family standing alongside him and Bradley. The twins looked polished and confident in their matching tuxedos, while Diana Johnson stood between them, elegant in her blue gown. The headline read, "Education Revolution: How Peerlift is Transforming Global Learning." A subheading below noted, "The Johnson twins' journey from rejection to recognition, and the mother who never stopped believing." Gerald stared at the cover, unable to mask his shock. The photograph itself was unremarkable, a standard event picture of philanthropy and business intersecting. But seeing Diana Johnson on the cover of Business Week, standing proudly with her successful sons, sent a jolt through his system that he couldn't immediately process. "There's an extensive feature inside," Bradley continued, either missing or ignoring his father's reaction. "It tells their whole story, how they built Peerlift from nothing, the obstacles they overcame. It's incredibly inspiring." Gerald took the magazine with slightly unsteady hands, opening to the article. The first page showed another photograph, this one of Marcus and Michael as teenagers, working on laptops at what appeared to be a kitchen table, with a younger Diana looking over their shoulders. The contrast between that image and the polished executives on the cover was stark. "It mentions us, by the way," Bradley added, his tone carefully neutral. "Apparently you met with them 20 years ago when they were first developing their concept." Gerald looked up sharply. "What exactly does it say?" Bradley hesitated, then replied, "It says that Whitmore Enterprises was among several companies that passed on their early proposal, but that, in Mrs. Johnson's words, rejection became redirection to better opportunities." Gerald exhaled slowly, relieved that Diana hadn't publicly condemned his short-sightedness. She could have easily portrayed him as the villain in their success story, but instead had chosen a more gracious framing. "She's quite remarkable," Bradley observed, watching his father closely. "The article describes how she worked double shifts as a nursing assistant to support the twins, never missing a parent-teacher conference despite her exhausting schedule. Even managed to complete her own nursing degree while they were at MIT. Gerald nodded absently, skimming the article. It detailed the twins' journey from their high school prototype to their current global expansion plans, highlighting key moments and mentors along the way. Elaine Chen of Next Level Tech featured prominently, described as the first investor who recognized their potential when others couldn't see past their youth and background. "I've been thinking," Bradley said, breaking the silence, "we should reconsider our approach to Peerlift." Gerald looked up, his expression questioning. "Instead of an acquisition, which they're clearly not interested in, what about a strategic partnership?" Bradley suggested. "Their international expansion creates opportunities for collaboration that could benefit both companies." Before Gerald could respond, Taylor's voice came through the intercom again. "Mr. Whitmore, your 9 o'clock appointment has arrived." "Give me 5 minutes," Gerald replied, then turned back to his son. "We'll discuss this later. I have meetings all morning." Bradley nodded, moving toward the door. He paused before leaving, glancing back at the magazine still open on his father's desk. "It's a good article, Dad. Worth reading in full when you have time." Alone again, Gerald stared at the magazine cover. Diana Johnson's eyes seemed to look directly at him from the glossy page, her expression one of quiet triumph. Not gloating or vindictive, but the serene confidence of a woman who had been proven right in her unwavering faith in her children. The day proceeded with its usual parade of meetings, decisions, and business operations, but Gerald found himself distracted. During a budget review, he caught himself wondering how Diana had managed household finances while supporting two brilliant teenagers on a nursing assistant's salary. In a product development meeting, he speculated about how differently Peerlift might have evolved if Whitmore Enterprises had provided early support and resources. By late afternoon, Gerald had canceled his remaining appointments, claiming a headache. In the unusual quiet of his office, he finally read the Business Week article in its entirety. The piece was expertly crafted, balancing the twins' technical innovations with the human story of their journey from a struggling single-parent household to the forefront of educational technology. One passage in particular caught his attention. When asked about obstacles they faced early on, Marcus Johnson is reflective. Every entrepreneur encounters people who can't see their vision, he explains. It's not personal. It's just that innovation often looks like impracticality until it's proven successful. His brother Michael adds, "We were fortunate to find mentors who believed in us when we most needed it." That's actually the philosophical foundation of Peerlift, the idea that support at critical moments can change someone's entire trajectory. Gerald closed the magazine, feeling the weight of those words. He had failed to be that supportive presence at a critical moment for the Johnson twins. Instead, he had dismissed their potential based on superficial judgments and biases he would never have acknowledged possessing. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife, asking when he would be home. Gerald replied that he was leaving shortly, then sat motionless for several minutes, contemplating the strange twist of fate that had brought the Johnsons back into his awareness after 2 decades. As he finally rose to leave, gathering his briefcase and the magazine, Gerald felt a sudden dizziness overtake him. The room seemed to tilt, and he gripped the edge of his desk for support. The sensation intensified, his vision blurring as the magazine slipped from his fingers. His last conscious thought before collapsing was of Diana Johnson's dignified face on the Business Week cover, the embodiment of everything he had failed to recognize 20 years ago. Gerald awoke to the sterile environment of a hospital room, the rhythmic beeping of monitors providing a disorienting soundtrack. He blinked, trying to orient himself, and gradually became aware of his son sitting in a chair beside the bed. "Dad," Bradley said, leaning forward with evident relief. "You're awake. How do you feel?" Gerald's mouth was dry, his thoughts foggy. "What happened?" "You fainted in your office," Bradley explained. "Taylor found you and called an ambulance. You've been unconscious for about 3 hours." Gerald tried to process this information, his mind still hazy. "Did the doctors say why?" Bradley nodded, his expression serious. "Exhaustion, high blood pressure, and what they're calling a minor cardiac event. Not a full heart attack, but a warning sign. They're running more tests, but the doctor was pretty clear that you need to make some lifestyle changes." Gerald closed his eyes briefly, absorbing this unwelcome news. At 71, he had prided himself on maintaining the same grueling work schedule he'd followed for decades, refusing to acknowledge the physical toll of aging. "Your phone has been ringing constantly," Bradley continued. "I've been handling the most urgent calls. The board wants to convene an emergency meeting to discuss contingency plans." A flicker of alarm passed through Gerald. "Contingency plans for what?" Bradley hesitated before answering. "For a potential leadership transition, Dad. The doctor recommended at least 2 weeks of complete rest, possibly longer. The company needs to continue functioning in your absence." The implication was clear. For the first time in his career, Gerald Whitmore was being forced to confront his own mortality and the inevitable succession of power. The timing seemed cruelly ironic, coming just as he was reckoning with past mistakes brought to light by the Business Week article. "Where is it?" Gerald asked suddenly. Bradley looked confused. Where's what? The magazine. Business Week. I had it with me when I... He trailed off, unable to say the word collapsed. I think it's with your personal effects, Bradley replied, looking concerned by this seemingly trivial concern. They put your belongings in the closet. Dad, should I call the doctor? Are you feeling confused? Gerald shook his head. No, I'm fine, I need to finish reading it. Bradley frowned, clearly puzzled by his father's fixation on the magazine in the midst of a health crisis. I'm sure it can wait until you're feeling better. Before Gerald could insist, a doctor entered the room, a woman in her 40s with a direct manner and intelligent eyes. Mr. Whitmore, I'm Dr. Patel. Good to see you awake. How are you feeling? The next hour passed in a blur of medical explanations, recommendations, and warnings. The message was unambiguous. Gerald needed to significantly reduce his stress levels, improve his diet, begin a moderate exercise regimen, and most dramatically, consider stepping back from day-to-day operations at Whitmore Enterprises. I understand you're an important man with many responsibilities, Dr. Patel concluded, but you won't be able to fulfill any of them if you're dead or severely disabled by a major stroke or heart attack. Consider this incident a gift, a warning that allows you to make changes before it's too late. After she left, a heavy silence fell between father and son. Gerald stared at the ceiling, grappling with the implications of the doctor's words. His entire identity was bound up in his role as CEO, the power, the respect, the constant activity. The prospect of relinquishing that position, even temporarily, felt like a surrender he wasn't prepared to make. The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning, Bradley said finally. I can represent your interests if you're not feeling up to it. We could set up a video call from here if you want to participate. Gerald turned to study his son's face, realizing with sudden clarity that Bradley was ready for this moment, had perhaps been ready for some time. Despite Gerald's frequent criticism and dismissal of his ideas, Bradley had been quietly preparing himself for leadership, developing his own vision for the company's future. No, Gerald said, surprising himself with the decision. You handle it. Tell them I'm following medical advice and taking 2 weeks of complete rest. You have temporary authority to act in my absence. Bradley's eyes widened slightly, clearly not having expected this response. Are you sure? That's a significant change from your usual approach. Gerald thought of the Johnson twins, who had succeeded spectacularly despite his rejection, and of Diana Johnson, who had recognized and nurtured her son's potential when others could not see it. Perhaps it was time for him to recognize that his own son might have capabilities he had failed to fully acknowledge. I'm sure, Gerald replied firmly. And Bradley, about Peerlift. Your idea for a strategic partnership rather than an acquisition is worth pursuing. Set up a meeting with the Johnson twins when I'm back on my feet. Bradley nodded, a new confidence evident in his posture. I will. And Dad, try to rest. The company will still be there when you're recovered. After Bradley left, a nurse arrived to check Gerald's vital signs. As she worked, Gerald asked, Could you bring me my personal belongings from the closet? There's a magazine I was reading. The nurse retrieved the items, and Gerald found the Business Week issue, now slightly crumpled from its fall to the office floor. The cover still showed the Johnsons standing alongside him and Bradley at the gala, a moment frozen in time that represented both his past failure and, perhaps, a future opportunity for redemption. As he stared at Diana Johnson's face on the cover, Gerald felt the weight of 20 years of missed possibilities. He had failed to see the potential in her sons, just as he had often failed to see the potential in his own son. But perhaps it wasn't too late to correct at least one of those mistakes. Gerald opened the magazine again, determined to understand the full story of what he had missed, and what he might still be able to learn from the family whose trajectory had diverged from his own in such remarkable ways. 2 weeks of enforced rest had transformed Gerald Whitmore in subtle but significant ways. The constant buzz of meetings, calls, and decisions had been replaced by quiet reflection, punctuated only by brief medical checkups and family visits. For perhaps the first time since his 20s, Gerald had time to think, not about strategies and acquisitions, but about his life, his choices, and the legacy he would eventually leave behind. Bradley had risen to the occasion admirably, handling the day-to-day operations of Whitmore Enterprises with a steady hand that surprised even the most skeptical board members. He provided his father with daily updates, concise, thoughtful reports that demonstrated both competence and a distinct leadership style that differed from Gerald's more autocratic approach. On the final day of his mandated recovery period, Gerald sat in the sunroom of his suburban mansion, reviewing Bradley's latest update. The company hadn't collapsed without him. Stock prices remained stable, ongoing projects continued on schedule, and a potential crisis with an overseas supplier had been deftly resolved through diplomacy rather than the aggressive tactics Gerald might have employed. "Your son is doing remarkably well," Gerald's wife, Catherine, observed as she brought him a cup of tea. At 55, she remained striking, though their 15-year marriage had been strained by Gerald's workaholic tendencies. Gerald nodded, setting aside the tablet. "He's found his own approach, less confrontational than mine, but effective in its way. Perhaps because it's authentic to who he is," Catherine suggested, sitting across from him. "He's not trying to be you, Gerald. He's being himself." The observation landed with unexpected weight. How much of Bradley's previous inadequacy had stemmed from Gerald's insistence that he follow the exact blueprint that had worked for his father? Had Gerald done to his own son what he had done to the Johnson twins, failed to recognize unique potential because it didn't fit his preconceived notions of success? "I've been thinking about the Peerlift founders," Gerald said, changing the subject slightly. "Bradley mentioned setting up a meeting with them to discuss a potential partnership." Catherine nodded. "He told me. It's scheduled for your first day back, tomorrow afternoon." Gerald raised an eyebrow. "He didn't mention that in his update." "I believe he wanted to surprise you," Catherine replied with a small smile. "He's quite excited about the possibilities for collaboration." Gerald sipped his tea thoughtfully. "I met them 20 years ago, you know. When they were just teenagers with an idea, I turned them down." "So I gathered from the Business Week article," Catherine said. She had read the magazine the day after Gerald's collapse, trying to understand his unusual fixation on it. "But it seems they did quite well without Whitmore Enterprises' support." "They did," Gerald acknowledged. "The question is whether we might have done better with theirs." The next morning, Gerald returned to Whitmore Enterprises' headquarters for the first time since his collapse. The familiar surroundings felt simultaneously comforting and slightly foreign, as if his 2-week absence had subtly altered the space, or perhaps it was he who had changed. Taylor greeted him with professional warmth. "Welcome back, Mr. Whitmore. How are you feeling?" "Better, thank you," Gerald replied, noting the genuine concern in her expression. "I understand my son has kept things running smoothly." "Very smoothly, sir," Taylor confirmed. "Mr. Bradley has been quite effective. Your schedule today has been limited per doctor's orders. Just the executive committee briefing this morning and the Peerlift meeting at 2. Gerald nodded, appreciating both the information and the reminder of his medical restrictions. "Thank you, Taylor. And the coffee?" She smiled slightly. "Decaf, sir. Doctor's orders." The executive committee briefing was held in the smaller conference room rather than the formal boardroom. Bradley's choice, Gerald suspected, to create a more collaborative atmosphere. The discussion was productive, with each department head providing concise updates and Bradley facilitating rather than dominating the conversation. Gerald found himself speaking less than usual, observing the dynamics his son had established in his absence. After the meeting, Bradley lingered as the others filed out. "What did you think?" he asked, a hint of nervousness breaking through his professional demeanor. Gerald considered his response carefully. "You've done well, Bradley. Better than I expected, if I'm being honest." Bradley's face registered surprise at the uncharacteristic admission. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. I've been thinking, Gerald continued, that perhaps we should formalize some of these changes. You've proven yourself capable of managing daily operations. I could focus on strategic initiatives and board relationships while you take on more of the executive leadership role. Bradley stared at his father, clearly stunned by this unprecedented offer to share power. Are you sure? This is unexpected. Consider it a trial arrangement, Gerald replied, unwilling to fully relinquish control all at once. We'll evaluate after 3 months. I appreciate the opportunity, Bradley said, collecting himself. And speaking of new directions, the meeting with Peerlift is confirmed for 2 o'clock. Both Johnson brothers will be attending, along with their mother, who apparently serves as their chief community officer. Gerald nodded, feeling an unexpected flutter of anxiety at the prospect of facing Diana Johnson again, this time in his own territory, but under very different circumstances than their first meeting. I've reviewed your partnership proposal. It's well constructed. Thank you, Bradley replied, clearly pleased by the rare compliment. I believe there's significant potential for synergy between their educational platform and our global technology infrastructure. As Bradley outlined the key points of his proposal, Gerald found himself genuinely impressed by his son's strategic thinking. The partnership he envisioned would leverage Whitmore Enterprises' international presence to accelerate Peerlift's global expansion, while giving Whitmore access to innovative educational technology that could enhance their corporate social responsibility profile. This could be transformative for both companies, Gerald acknowledged when Bradley finished. Assuming the Johnsons are receptive, that's the unknown factor, Bradley admitted. Their response to our acquisition inquiry was polite but firmly negative. I'm hoping a partnership approach will be more appealing. At precisely 2 o'clock, Taylor announced the arrival of the Peerlift team. Gerald and Bradley rose to greet them in the reception area of the executive floor, a small gesture of respect that departed from Gerald's usual practice of having visitors brought to him. Marcus and Michael Johnson entered with the synchronized movement that seemed to be their trademark, dressed in complementary but not identical business attire. Behind them came Diana Johnson, elegant in a tailored pantsuit, her expression revealing nothing as she met Gerald's gaze. "Welcome to Whitmore Enterprises," Gerald said, extending his hand first to Diana in a deliberate reversal of protocol. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Diana's handshake was firm, her eyes assessing. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Whitmore. I understand congratulations are in order on your recovery." Gerald blinked, surprised that she knew about his health crisis. News travels fast, it seems. "Boston's business community is smaller than it appears," Marcus observed, shaking hands with both Whitmores. Michael nodded in agreement. "We were glad to hear you're doing better. Health comes first, something our mother always emphasized." The brief exchange highlighted the difference between the Johnson twins and his own son, Gerald realized. They mentioned their mother naturally, with evident respect and affection, while Gerald and Bradley maintained a formal distance even after their recent progress. They moved to the conference room, where Bradley had arranged a casual seating area rather than the imposing boardroom table. It was another departure from Whitmore tradition, creating an atmosphere of collaboration rather than negotiation. "Before we begin," Gerald said once everyone was seated, "I'd like to address our previous meeting 20 years ago." The Johnson twins exchanged a quick glance while Diana's expression remained calm but attentive. "I made a significant error in judgment," Gerald continued, the words coming more easily than he had expected. "I failed to recognize the potential of your concept and, more importantly, of you as innovators. That mistake cost Whitmore Enterprises a valuable opportunity, but more significantly, it represented a failure of vision on my part." A brief silence followed this unprecedented acknowledgement. It was Michael who responded first, his tone measured. "We appreciate your candor, Mr. Whitmore, but as our mother often says, rejection is just redirection. That meeting led us to partners who were aligned with our vision from the beginning. Indeed, Marcus added, everything unfolded as it needed to. We harbor no ill feelings about past decisions. Gerald nodded, accepting their gracious response. Nevertheless, I wanted to acknowledge my mistake before we discuss potential collaboration. The past cannot be changed, but it can inform how we move forward. Bradley smoothly transitioned to his partnership proposal, outlining the potential benefits for both companies with engaging enthusiasm. The Johnson twins listened attentively, occasionally asking incisive questions that revealed their deep understanding of both technology and business dynamics. Diana remained largely silent, Gerald noticed, though she was clearly engaged. Her eyes followed the conversation intently, and he had the distinct impression she was evaluating not just the business proposition but the men themselves, gauging whether the Whitmores could be trusted with her son's creation. When Bradley concluded his presentation, Marcus turned to his brother. "Your thoughts?" Michael considered for a moment. "The technical integration makes sense. Your global infrastructure would significantly reduce our timeline for international expansion. And the commitment to maintaining Peerlift's existing social impact model is encouraging," Marcus added, turning to Diana. "Mom, your perspective?" Gerald was struck by the natural way they included her in the decision-making process, not as a formality, but as a valued advisor whose opinion carried genuine weight. Diana straightened slightly. "The proposal has merit. My concern is cultural alignment. Peerlift was built on principles of educational equity and opportunity. We need assurance that those values would be preserved in any partnership." Gerald recognized the underlying question. Could Whitmore Enterprises and Gerald himself be trusted to honor commitments to social impact over pure profit? It was a fair concern, given their history. "Mrs. Johnson," Gerald said, "your point is well taken. Perhaps I could address it by sharing some recent perspectives." He proceeded to describe his 2-week convalescence and the reflections it had prompted about legacy, values, and the true measure of success. Without sentimentality but with unusual candor, he acknowledged that his single-minded pursuit of corporate growth had come at the expense of other important considerations, including family relationships and broader social responsibility. "Bradley has been advocating for a more balanced approach for some time," Gerald admitted, nodding toward his son. "My recent health event has made me more receptive to his vision. This partnership would represent a meaningful step in that new direction." Diana studied him thoughtfully. "People can change their perspectives, Mr. Whitmore. I've seen it many times in my work with educational communities. The question is whether those changes translate to institutional values that outlast any single leader." "A fair question," Bradley interjected, "which is why our proposal includes the creation of a joint oversight committee for the partnership, with equal representation from both companies and binding commitments to maintaining Peerlift's core mission." The discussion continued for another hour, delving into technical details, governance structures, and implementation timelines. Throughout, Gerald observed the Johnsons' interaction with growing appreciation. They functioned as a seamless unit, the twins complementing each other's strengths, while Diana provided the grounding perspective that kept their vision anchored in human impact rather than just technological innovation. As the meeting concluded, with both sides agreeing to have their legal teams draft preliminary partnership agreements, Gerald found himself genuinely energized by the prospect of collaboration. It wasn't just the business opportunity, though that was significant, but the chance to be part of something meaningful, something transformative in a way that transcended quarterly profits and market share. "We appreciate your time and thoughtful proposal," Marcus said as they prepared to leave. "Our team will be in touch within the week." "One last thing," Gerald said, an impulse taking him by surprise. "Would the three of you consider joining Catherine and me for dinner next week? A more informal opportunity to get acquainted outside of business parameters?" The Johnsons exchanged quick glances, that silent communication that seemed to be their hallmark. It was Diana who answered, her expression softening slightly. "We would be pleased to accept, Mr. Whitmore. Thank you for the invitation." After they had departed, Bradley turned to his father with undisguised amazement. "A dinner invitation? That's unprecedented. You never socialize with potential partners." Gerald considered his son's observation. "Perhaps that's been another mistake. Business is ultimately about relationships, isn't it? That family has built something remarkable together. I'm curious to understand how." Bradley nodded slowly, a new understanding dawning in his expression. "This is about more than just the partnership opportunity, isn't it?" "Yes," Gerald admitted, surprising himself with his candor. "I think it might be." As they walked back to their respective offices, Gerald found himself reflecting on the contrast between the Johnson family's evident connection and his own relationship with Bradley. Diana Johnson had raised sons who respected and valued her input, who had created a place for her in their professional success. Meanwhile, Gerald had spent decades keeping Bradley at arm's length, measuring him against impossible standards and finding him wanting. Perhaps, Gerald thought, the business partnership with Peerlift wasn't the only relationship that needed rebuilding. And maybe, just maybe, Diana Johnson had something to teach him about that too. 1 year later, the atrium of the newly renovated Whitmore Johnson Educational Innovation Center buzzed with excitement. The converted warehouse in Boston's Innovation District had been transformed into a showcase for the partnership between Whitmore Enterprises and Peerlift, a physical manifestation of the collaboration that had evolved from tentative discussions into a groundbreaking alliance. Diana Johnson stood near the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived for the center's grand opening celebration. At 58, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of a woman who had witnessed the fulfillment of her greatest hopes, not just for her son's success, but for the realization of their shared vision to transform educational access globally. "Mrs. Johnson," a familiar voice called. Diana turned to see Catherine Whitmore approaching, elegant in a navy dress that complemented Diana's own attire. The two women had developed an unexpected friendship over the past year, finding common ground despite their different backgrounds. "Catherine," Diana greeted warmly, embracing her. "Everything looks wonderful. Your design team did an amazing job with the space." "They had excellent direction," Catherine replied, glancing around the atrium where interactive displays showcased Peerlift's global impact. Bradley and the twins were quite specific about creating an environment that feels welcoming rather than corporate. The mention of their sons brought matching smiles to both women's faces. The partnership between Whitmore Enterprises and Peerlift had created unexpected connections, not just between companies but between families who might never have intersected otherwise. "How is Gerald feeling about today's announcement?" Diana asked, referring to the succession plan that would be officially revealed during the ceremony. Catherine's expression turned thoughtful. "Surprisingly at peace. This past year has changed him in ways I wouldn't have believed possible. Working with your sons, seeing their approach to leadership, it's given him a new perspective." Diana nodded, understanding perfectly. The partnership had indeed transformed both organizations in profound ways. Whitmore Enterprises had gained more than access to innovative educational technology. It had absorbed some of Peerlift's organizational culture, the emphasis on purpose alongside profit, the collaborative leadership style, the genuine commitment to positive social impact. Meanwhile, Peerlift had leveraged Whitmore's global infrastructure and business expertise to expand its reach far beyond what the twins could have accomplished independently. The platform now served students in 27 countries, with expansion plans for 15 more in the coming year. "Mom!" Michael's voice interrupted her thoughts. He approached with Marcus and Bradley, the three men having just completed a final review of the ceremony plans. "The press is starting to arrive. CNN and the BBC are setting up for the live broadcast." Diana felt a surge of maternal pride seeing her sons alongside Bradley Whitmore. Over the past year, the three had developed a genuine friendship that transcended their business relationship. Bradley had found in Marcus and Michael the peers he had lacked at Whitmore Enterprises, contemporaries who respected his ideas and challenged him to grow. The twins, in turn, had gained a colleague who complemented their technical expertise with invaluable corporate political savvy. "Is everything ready for the demonstration?" Diana asked, ever practical. Marcus nodded. "The satellite link to the schools in Kenya, Brazil, and Vietnam is confirmed. The students are excited to be part of the ceremony." "And the announcement?" she pressed, looking at Bradley. "All set," he confirmed. "The board voted unanimously yesterday. It's official." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Gerald Whitmore, who moved through the growing crowd with purpose, nodding to guests, but clearly focused on reaching their small group. At 72, he had finally begun to show his age, walking more deliberately than a year ago. Yet there was a lightness to him that had been absent before, a man who had set down some heavy burden he'd carried for decades. "There you all are," he said, joining their circle. "The governor just arrived, and Elizabeth Mitchell is giving a last-minute interview about the Foundation's expanded commitment." The past year had seen remarkable changes in Gerald. His health crisis had forced a re-evaluation of priorities that might never have occurred otherwise. The partnership with Peerlift, initially his son's idea, had evolved into a personal mission, engaging him in ways that pure profit-seeking never had. "Gerald," Diana acknowledged with a warm smile. Their initial wariness had gradually transformed into a respectful friendship, built on candid conversations and shared commitment to the partnership's success. "Are you ready for your part in the ceremony?" He nodded, an uncharacteristic hint of nervousness visible only to those who knew him well. "It's time. Overdue, in fact." Bradley checked his watch. "We should take our places. They'll be starting the introductions in 5 minutes." As the group moved toward the stage area, Diana found herself walking alongside Gerald. "A remarkable day," she observed. "I don't think either of us could have imagined this outcome when we first met 20 years ago." Gerald chuckled softly. "Indeed not. Life takes unexpected turns, doesn't it? That day I saw only what I expected to see, not what was actually before me." "We all have our blind spots," Diana replied generously. "The question is whether we're willing to recognize and correct them when given the chance." Gerald glanced at her with genuine respect. "You've taught me a great deal this past year, Diana. Not just about educational technology or community engagement, but about what truly constitutes success." Before she could respond, they reached the stage area where a podium had been set up before rows of chairs already filling with distinguished guests. The ceremony was designed to showcase both the technology platform and the human impact of the Whitmore Peerlift partnership, a balance that reflected the integrated values of both organizations. Elizabeth Mitchell, now in her late 60s but still commanding in presence, opened the proceedings with a brief history of the Mitchell Foundation's involvement with Peerlift from its earliest days. She was followed by a series of speakers including education officials, technology experts, and most movingly, students whose lives had been transformed by access to the platform. When it was time for the live demonstration, Marcus and Michael took center stage, connecting via satellite to classrooms in Kenya, Brazil, and Vietnam simultaneously. The audience watched, rapt, as students from these vastly different contexts engaged in a collaborative learning exercise facilitated by Peerlift's translation features and cultural context algorithms. "This is the future of education," Marcus explained as the demonstration concluded. "Not just technology connecting students across distances, but genuine human connection transcending barriers of language, culture, and economic circumstance." Michael continued seamlessly, "What began in our mother's kitchen 20 years ago has evolved beyond anything we could have imagined. But the core principle remains the same, that every student deserves access to the support they need to reach their full potential." The twins then invited Diana to join them, acknowledging her role not just in their personal journey, but in shaping Peerlift's community-centered approach. The audience applauded warmly as Diana spoke briefly about the importance of human relationships in educational technology, the principle that had guided Peerlift's development from the beginning. Then came the moment Gerald had been preparing for. He approached the podium with measured steps, surveying the gathered crowd with the confidence of a man who had spent decades commanding attention in corporate boardrooms. Yet there was a different quality to his presence now, a humility that had been absent in his earlier years. "Distinguished guests, colleagues, friends," he began, "today marks not just the official opening of this innovation center, but a significant transition for Whitmore Enterprises." A murmur of anticipation rippled through the audience. "For 45 years, I have had the privilege of leading this company, watching it grow from a small regional firm to a global technology leader. That growth has been gratifying, but in recent years, particularly since our partnership with Peerlift began, I've come to understand that true success encompasses far more than market share or profit margins." Gerald paused, his gaze finding Bradley in the front row. "Success is also measured in the legacy we create, the lives we impact, and the wisdom to recognize when it's time for new leadership with fresh perspectives. Therefore, I am announcing today that effective immediately, Bradley Whitmore will assume the role of Chief Executive Officer of Whitmore Enterprises." Applause broke out, with many in the audience rising to their feet. Bradley appeared genuinely moved as he joined his father at the podium. "I will continue as chairman of the board," Gerald continued once the applause subsided, "focusing specifically on our educational initiatives and this transformative partnership with Peerlift. But the day-to-day leadership of Whitmore Enterprises now passes to a new generation, one that understands intuitively what took me decades to learn, that business can and should be a force for positive change in the world." As father and son shook hands, Diana felt her eyes misting with emotion. The gesture represented far more than a corporate succession. It was a public acknowledgement of trust and respect that had been hard-won over the past year. The ceremony concluded with the formal ribbon cutting, performed jointly by the Whitmore and Johnson families, a symbolic union of two legacies now intertwined through partnership and shared purpose. As the formal program transitioned to a reception, Diana found a quiet moment to slip away from the crowd. She made her way to a small exhibition area where photographs chronicled Peerlift's journey from concept to global platform. Among them was a framed copy of the Business Week cover that had triggered Gerald's health crisis a year earlier. The Johnson family alongside the Whitmores at the Mitchell Foundation Gala. It all began with that cover in a way. Gerald's voice came from behind her. He had followed her to the exhibition, perhaps seeking his own moment of reflection amidst the celebration. Diana turned to face him. "I prefer to think it began 20 years ago in your office, though neither of us recognized it at the time." Gerald nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I've never asked. Did you know who I was when you brought your sons to meet me that day? Had we met before?" "No," Diana replied. "Richard Townsend suggested you. He believed you might see what he saw in Marcus and Michael. Instead, I saw only what I expected to see," Gerald acknowledged. "But you saw their potential from the beginning." Diana smiled, her expression softening with memories. "That's a mother's job, isn't it? To see the possibility in her children even when others might miss it." "You did far more than see it," Gerald said. "You nurtured it, protected it, sacrificed for it. Without your belief in them, Peerlift might never have existed." Diana considered this, then shook her head slightly. "They would have found their way regardless. Marcus and Michael have always been exceptional, but having someone who believes in you unconditionally, it makes the journey less lonely, I think." A comfortable silence fell between them as they both contemplated the photographs, visual markers of a journey neither could have predicted. "I want to thank you, Diana," Gerald said finally, "not just for the partnership that has revitalized Whitmore Enterprises, but for the example you've set. Watching your relationship with your sons has taught me a great deal about my own relationship with Bradley." Diana studied him with genuine warmth. "You've come a long way this past year, Gerald. The way you publicly acknowledged Bradley today, that was a gift far more valuable than any company title." Gerald nodded, uncharacteristic emotion visible in his eyes. "Better late than never, I suppose, though I regret the years wasted." "Don't dwell on regrets," Diana advised gently. "Focus on the present relationship you're building. That's all any of us can do. Make the most of the time we have now." From across the exhibition hall, they could see their families mingling with guests, the twins deep in conversation with international education officials, Bradley and Catherine speaking with the governor, all of them moving with the easy confidence of people comfortable in their purpose. "We should rejoin the celebration," Diana suggested, gesturing toward the gathering. Gerald offered his arm with old-fashioned courtesy. "Indeed we should. After all, this center represents just the beginning of what our families can accomplish together." As they walked back toward the reception, Diana reflected on the strange, winding path that had led to this moment. 20 years ago, she had left Gerald Whitmore's office feeling defeated, trying to hide her disappointment from her teenage sons. She could never have imagined that rejection would set in motion a journey that would eventually bring them full circle, not as supplicants seeking help, but as equal partners in a vision that transcended either family's original ambitions. The Innovation Center hummed with activity around them. Educators, technologists, students, and community leaders united in celebration of what had been accomplished and excitement for what lay ahead. It was, Diana thought, the perfect embodiment of the principle she had instilled in her sons from childhood. Rejection is just redirection to something better than you initially imagined. And sometimes, if you persevered long enough, even those who once rejected you might eventually recognize what they had missed and faint at the realization of their mistake. Diana smiled at the thought as she rejoined her sons, surrounded by the future they had built together. Some lessons were worth waiting 20 years to teach. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.